when it starts. So I'm going to guess.
decades of government-sponsored discrimination, and even now is a fight for survival. Black farmers have faced discrimination for centuries, and today there's fewer than 49,000 of them in the U.S. That's less than the entire student body at the University of Texas.
We had to fight for the land, fight for the equipment, for the right farmers, and yes, that land was inherited.
Black farmers lost 80% of their land between 1910 and 2007, in large part because of systemic racial discrimination. Folks are starting to realize that we don't actually have a future of farming unless we include all of the various ethnicities and races in this nation. Knows a lot about the history of black farmers in the U.S., in part because her grandmother was a farmer. A lot of people don't know that the 12.5 million Africans who were kidnapped from their home were mostly rounded up because they were expert agriculturalists. Even after the Civil War ended, the government never delivered on its promise of reparations. It said it would give free people a plot no larger than 40 acres and a mule. It didn't. Despite the fact that the promise never happened, we did manage to save enough money to purchase plots of land, and then the landowner would receive part of the crop. But high interest rates and unpredictable harvests often left sharecroppers, like John Boyd Jr.'s grandfather, indebted to landowners.
He would always wind up owing this for money, and I couldn't figure that out. So I had to say, I'm going to work over here, harvest a crop, and you actually owe the plantation on the money.
John is a fourth-generation farmer and the founder of the National Black Farmers Association. His family story is one with a landscape fertilized by black labor. He is part of the 1.4% of black people who make up the country's 3.4 million farmers. The U.S. government has restricted the success of black farmers, and John would become a driver in their fight for equity.
According to the USDA, the last plantation, the way that they're treated black farmers, we've been degraded, humiliated.
For decades, the U.S. Department of Agriculture systematically favored white farmers by denying loans to black farmers. Like his grandfather, John found himself financially struggling to keep his farm. He went to the USDA for aid, and the intense confrontation with a local USDA loan officer nearly ended in a physical fight.
The farm operator known as the USDA loan officer, he spat on me. I just lost him. I really wondered what was that. He said, if you don't learn how to talk to me, you're never going to get a loan in this county.
The Department of Agriculture is often the last resort for farmers who don't qualify for loans from other sources. And discrimination was widespread at its local branches, which were largely run by all-white county committees.
We filed for the application at the USDA, and 6 months later, they claimed they couldn't. They had lost those loans, but they couldn't file.
Lester Bonner is a 74-year-old farmer from an agricultural family, and he says his fight with the USDA started in 1983. The land Bonner and his family tilled for 18 years was owned by a white man who promised them they'd get the first opportunity to purchase the ground. But the government didn't make that easy.
We sit in the yard 2-3 hours, a couple of days waiting on the guys saying they're going to come out and do a bill, but nobody never showed.
Throughout the 1990s, it took an average of 60 days for white farmers to get their loan applications processed. But for black farmers, it took 220 days. Stories of unfair lending practices were so common among black farmers that a group of them, including John Boyd Jr., banded together. Their fight led John and 400 others to sue the government in a class action lawsuit known as Pigford versus Glickman. 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 Known as Pigford versus Glickman.
Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing? I think it's pretty amazing. Wasn't that wonderful? My name is Dr. Tiffany Bourgeois, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Arts Administration, Education, and Policy. And today, I'm so excited and honored to share the stage with Brotherhood Dance, as well as the Growing and Growth Collective, and also the Environmental Professionals Network. When I came today, I thought about what would be important and what would be relevant to discuss with you all as it relates to art, agriculture, and advancing the relationship of Black people on land. And I'm not going to lie to you, it got personal. I started thinking about who I was, what my work was, and as well as who the people are that I would be sharing the stage with tonight. So, of course, I have to do the formal thing of welcoming you all here to this Earth Day celebration, which is hosted, once again, by EPN. That's where I started my conversation with myself that I would ultimately share with you all, is thinking about how EPN connects Ohio's environmental professionals and others passionate about our natural resources. Connects. When I think about connection, I think about the sharing, this collective experience that we have. And the thought brought me to the performances today, as well as the conversations we'll be having. So I look forward to sharing what I think about when talking about the collective regarding Black on Earth, talking about my own experiences, and then connecting it to the Growing and Growth Collective. When I first heard about Brotherhood Dance, I did a little research because I am a professor. I have to do a little research and see what's up. But what I found was exciting and inspiring and made me more excited about what was going to happen today, which was a shared experience. If you had the opportunity, which I hope you did, to participate in their installation, it was about the sharing of experiences with Black growers here in our region. I left with dirt on my hands, which doesn't bother me at all, which I am actually happy about, because we are here talking about growing. We're here talking about the earth. So I, as well as many of you all, walked away with dirt on your hands. But not only did we walk away with dirt on our hands, but we also learned about the other folks who are doing the work in our community. That was just in the reception. As we were making the procession, as we were a part of the processional down here, that was once another collective experience. When they rang the bell, people's heads perked up, people turned around, and decided to share in walking from the reception area to here. I have to share a little bit about myself. My background's in theater. I am a former audience development director. So when a performance is happening, what do? I look at the audience. I look to see how people are interacting and engaging with what is happening on stage. And I can honestly say that I saw people sharing in the experience. There was a collective moments of awe. There was a collective or shared time of inspiration, whether or not it was you with the person next to you. Very few of you all walked in by yourself. Whether or not it was you taking in the moment on your phone to share with someone else or to share with yourself later. The activities, the experiences, the performance, the movement on stage was collective. I was inspired by what I saw. I had moments in the stillness of reflection. And as I was reflecting on my experience with agriculture, my experience with the arts, my experience with being a Black woman, my memories, my thoughts, I was never alone. It was in those moments of reflection that I thought of others, that I thought of myself in instances with others, like my mother, like my own children, like my fellow growers in the audience. So, when we're thinking about art, agriculture, and advancing the relationship of Black people on land, it is a collective experience. A little bit more about me. I am from Kansas City, Missouri, the home of jazz and great barbecue. And if you have a comment or thought about good barbecue, we can discuss that after this. I'm down for it. I'm down. But I'm going to really focus on my experience in the arts, which began as a family tradition. My grandfather was a jazz musician. His name was J. Max Shan, and he played jazz music all over the world. My mother managed a jazz nightclub. So while other folks had bedtimes, we were listening to jam sessions. And if my mother is watching, it was a lovely time. Thank you for that experience. And once again, this idea of a shared tradition, a shared or collective experience is what I'm getting at. Because my family, my mother, my grandparents instilled in me this appreciation for the arts, it only grew and developed. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I did go through a bit of a rebellious phase and decided to study theater and not music. My twin sister kept up with the music part. So, like I said, my background's in theater, but it's still in the arts. And it's about these shared experiences. It's about the shared feelings, the shared memories that happen on stage that impact the people that we are in the audience with, that I'm talking about. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my history with agriculture and growing. It, as well, begins in Kansas City, Missouri, with my mother. Every summer, we would create a garden. We would plant and we would harvest. And I will, once again, if you want to talk about barbecue, I'll talk to you again about the great green beans, the amazing things that we grew in our garden that we ate. But it wasn't the food, I'm not going to lie. That was the best part of our gardens. It was a shared time we had together. It was her telling me about her mother and her grandmother and how they grew together, and passing on of the traditions, the knowledge, the wisdom from one generation to the next. A collective understanding, a sharing of knowledge. As I mentioned before, I am a professor. So how does this show up in my work? What does this mean? So in general, I have the pleasure of studying arts and cultural institution engagement. I've had the pleasure of looking at how arts and cultural institutions engage with the Super Bowl, how arts teachers collaborate, specifically arts teachers of color collaborate. I've also had the pleasure of sitting on different panels and working and discussing issues related to advocacy, related to equity, related to diversity. And I would be remiss if I did not give you all just a little bit of homework. So when it comes to discussing arts, agriculture, advocacy, equity, there's some folks that I think that you should know about. Dr. Bobby J. Smith's work, Dr. Bobby J. Smith II, his recent work I found to be pretty interesting when it comes to food justice. Doctors Joni Acuff, Teron Banner, Bria Heidelberg, Antonio Kyler's work on arts equity, justice, advocacy, in the arts and arts education are some that you should look to. And as well as if you're thinking about the explicit connection of arts and agriculture, I think you can look at the different programmatic instances as well as different philosophical instances where we think of how arts and agriculture can overlap. Whenever we're discussing these folks, I think one group of scholars that would be helpful in understanding are Bond, Overholser, Drinkwater, Wilson, and Callahan. They had some work recently about about the programmatic instances and the overlaps of arts and agriculture. That might be helpful. But if we continue talking about what is it that we're discussing today, this overlap, this connection, what does it mean? As a Black woman, I still have a garden. Each summer and fall, I have a garden. And what does it mean to share, have a collective experience? I can tell you real quickly. I have 3 children, 4, 3, and 1. And we collectively, they collectively dumped all of their seeds into their grow boxes and into their grow bags. They did not care about companion planting. They did not care about what I thought about spacing of the seeds. They definitely did not care that I thought that it was too soon in the season. Because guess what? As they were dumping their seeds, throwing dirt, and letting me know that their pumpkins were going to grow big, 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 I shared with them about how I was able to garden with my mother and how her mother and her mother's mother shared in that same experience. So once again, we're thinking about this collective, this grouping, this sharing. So when I go back to thinking about my history and my traditions, being jazz, being agriculture, to my work that is centered and shared amongst these other scholars that I mentioned, to now sharing this collective experience with my own children, it takes me to the Growing and Growth Collective. Now, I believe that art and agriculture do something similar. They allow you to connect to your community. They allow you to create or be a part of the creation process. And the thing about arts and the thing about agriculture is you might start something, but you don't know how it's going to end. And it's in those shared moments of unknown, it's in the collective, I guess, waiting for what will happen, that I think the magic is. That I think those are the points in life that are valuable. But if you want to think about an institution or an organization that I believe is really finding those overlaps, those instances, those moments of unknown, and sharing in them, I would point you to the Growing and Growth Collective. GGC embodies art, agriculture, and advancing the relationship of Black people on land. As an organization, it represents the nuanced history of Black people. And I truly believe it's a space for the convergence of art and agriculture. So this is when I nod to Jera and Adrienne and welcome them on stage. Thank you so much for a couple moments of your time. Okay.
All righty. Well, first, thank you. Oh, yeah. Can you guys hear me? Is this good? Okay, awesome. My voice also carries, so that also helps. So first of all, thank you guys for being here today. And the way that we'll set this up is we'll take you through a few slides, just kind of explaining who we are. There are some new faces in the room, so we wanted to explain who we are and what we do, and then from there we have some questions that Dr. Bourgeois will present to us, and I think we open up for questions. So we'll go from there. All righty, so, and bear with me with the clicker. I think I got it. Oh yeah, and my name. So I am Adrienne Williams with the Growing and Growth Collective.
I'm Jera Oliver.
Okay, awesome. So, so we are two of the co-founders of the Growing and Growth Collective, and we are a grassroots organization based here in Columbus, Ohio. And so as Dr. Bourgeois said, we do work around introducing BIPOC to urban agriculture, promoting urban agriculture with BIPOC individuals. And so as we were kind of talking about who we are, the ethos of who we are, we thought it was appropriate to start with this slide. Show of hands, anyone familiar with this book, read this book? I'm sure a lot of you may have it. If not, I would implore all of you to look into it. So this is Farming While Black by Leah Penniman. And the reason why on this slide we decided to say this is the foundation, I think this is a really defining text for us. So kind of giving you a little bit about my background, I kind of have a similar introduction into agriculture through my mom, who's also in the audience. So about 5 years ago, my mom and my aunt, we decided we wanted to get a community plot in a community garden space. And we've always been around like plants and gardening. Like my grandfather, had a porch garden, which is pretty, I guess you can say common, especially as you think about Black folks and just, coming up from the South. We've always just had agriculture as a way of life, even when we lived in Ohio and other places up north. So it wasn't too much of a leap for my family to be interested in that. But I also have a background in African American studies. And so I didn't want to just engage with the soil and engage with the land. I wanted to be very intentional about that history. And so a friend of mine from college actually told me about Leah Penniman, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. And this has been an amazing text that's pretty much defined a lot of what we do as the Growing and Growth Collective. And just to kind of give you a bullet point of this text, it gives you a how-to in growing, but it also interrogates our engagement with agriculture as Black people. So we know that there is a very nuanced and honestly a very painful history with Black folks and as it relates to the land and certainly around agriculture. And I think Leah Penniman does a phenomenal job of addressing those really heavy and weighty topics. And so we said this is a foundational text for us and really got us to really explore agriculture in a very different way. It made us intentional about having those conversations both in and out of the soil. So this is why we introduce this as a foundational text. And so that takes us to our overall mission, and that's where our mission is, and I'm going to have to read this verbatim, guys. As much as I've read it, it's still not, committed to memory. Too many passwords I have to remember. That's a joke for my mom. We're always talking about too many passwords we have to remember. So our mission is to leverage urban agriculture as a means of social action in high Black, Indigenous, and people of color neighborhoods, also known as BIPOC, to help improve health outcomes, deepen community engagement, and foster economic empowerment. I will not bleed this slide too much, but essentially, we wanted to say, yes, we know of the very obvious benefits of agriculture. So there is a health component, being outside, literally having your hands in soil. There's empirical data to support the benefits of literally having your hands in soil and obviously the food aspect. But knowing that we have that really nuanced history around, chattel slavery and compulsory, sharecropping and these other exploitative type of connections to the land, we wanted to make sure that there was an empowerment piece, especially around engaging with agriculture and that there is an economic component to it. As Brotherhood Dance, the soundtrack, the sound bite, I guess, in part of the performance, they talk about that decline in the number of farmers. Well, that's a number, but there's actual dollars and cents in equity and wealth that's connected to that. And so we wanted to, make that a possibility for folks who may not have really thought that that's a reality for themselves. So that's why we wanted to make sure we brought in those pieces. And then secondly here, for our vision, we said we envision a positive relationship between BIPOC and the land. We will foster an empowering narrative about BIPOC engagement in agriculture and land stewardship. Urban agriculture will be a multi-generational way of life for BIPOC in Columbus, Ohio, and beyond. So again, that piece around empowerment. The only other thing that I'll kind of speak to here is that multi-generational piece. Selfishly, when I thought about GGC, I saw folks who were, older than me, who might have had parents that came up from the South, and agriculture was a way of life. So that was something that resonated with them. And I know for children, there might be, gardening programs in schools, but when I looked around, I didn't see a lot of millennials, zennials, or even Gen X that necessarily looks like me, and I'm getting some nods over there because it's real. I'm like, okay, I am a 30-something that's interested in this, but I'm not seeing anyone that looks like me. And so we wanted to be very intentional around that, and so that's that last piece. And then I'll go through the impact pillars really quickly and then shift it over to Jera. So we said GGC facilitates responsive, culturally relevant, and evidence-based programming around, and these are our 4 impact pillars: agricultural education in cities, food access and affordability, comprehensive health and wellness, and equitable community development. And so I'm going to pass this off to Jera to kind of talk through some of these impact pillars in more depth.
Okay. Oh, well, it could have gone anywhere. This is a map of our locations. So we do, I think, there's a lot of little connection points. And the way it kind of jumps around, it's not being disorganized. It's just the reality of how grassroots organizations and initiatives kind of develop, right? So, okay, we have this kind of intellectual perspective on urban agriculture and bringing BIPOC audiences into a particularly Black audiences. And it makes entire sense that we're based in a community that is historically Black. We both reside on the Near East Side, and a lot of people in the audience also do as well, and particularly King Lincoln Bronzeville. So just for orientation's sake, if you know where the King Art Center is, maybe Franklin Park Conservatory is on the further east end, and the King Art Center is on the west end. And it just so happens that the gardens that we manage, there's more than just us. We partner with Broad Street Presbyterian Church, Bronzeville Growers Market, and Maroon Arts Group, and there's just a lot of organizations that have other growing spaces on the Near East Side. But these happen to be the 6 that we directly support, 4 of which are on land bank property, so that has its own nuance. And then there's also the location, Julia Lynn Walker Gateway Learning Garden, where she's here. Is she still in the space? She was here. Oh, she had to leave. Okay, but she was here at the King Arts Complex. So that has a very intentional meaning, which we'll get to. And then also Broad Street Presbyterian Church has a garden that it's on its own property, but it's part of this collective, and we'll speak to that as well. So, yeah, we're based in a Black community to really drive home the focus of what we're talking about. So agricultural education in cities, really, I won't read the slide, but we're, thinking from scratch. I will sprinkle in little bits about myself. So I work at The Ohio State University, right? And I also specifically worked in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences for 5.5 years. And I would always make sure when I was talking to alumni, let them know that I did not seek that out. I have no knowledge. At that point, I had no idea, right? And even up through 4 years of me being there, it really did still feel super foreign to me, right? And so she shared a little bit about her background coming to agriculture. Mine, I grew up, I guess, kind of around it. My dad had a tomato garden in our backyard, but there was no education there in it. Yeah, like, I mean, we went to like farms, like as kids, you know, it was around, you drive and you see the corn, but I had no experience with it. But even like I said, during my 4 years, it ended up being 5.5, but 4 years in FAS, I still didn't feel like it was for me or of me or had any connection to it, right? Except March 17th, 2020, when we all got sent home, and I delayed and dragged my feet, and I hadn't gone grocery shopping or anything. And at that time, I was a flexitarian, so I ate mostly vegetables. And I walk into, but I had stopped eating beef and pork by that time. I walk into Walmart, because it was the closest store to me picking up my son's school, and it was like beef jerky, potted meat, stuff that I literally did not eat, you know? And I was, at that moment, all of the memories came back. Like, my father grew up on a farm. He was a farmer. The whole family farmed until 1950. And there's a story for that, too, how they got to New York. They farmed along the way to move. They moved from community to community until they got to New York. It took them 2 years to get from Alabama to Long Island. Who knew? Anywho, so I realized in that moment, I literally went from a farming family to not having a pot, not a seed, not a nothing, knowing how to feed myself. And in that moment, it just clicked. So I needed this agricultural education. I happen to have access to it in plethora, right? But there's a lot of people who don't. So it could be anything from people who have our experience that may have been around it or may know something and just need a little bit of confidence, which goes a long way. To people who will get a plot with us, you know, because we have res beds that you can reserve. We'll come on planting day. We'll plant. It's all fun. Everyone's in the pictures. And then we'll say, okay, so who waters it? You do. You do. So, you know, like, even that, people just don't know, like, what happens next, you know? So this is what we're doing, helping anyone from literally not knowing that they have to manage their own plot to figuring out how to perfect tomatoes. We help make the connections. We bring in Dr. Tim McDermott. We bring in all of the local experts, and so that's part of what we do. And let's see here, equitable community development. So again, like what Adrienne was speaking to, you know, knowing the loss of wealth that many of, you know, Black families, indigenous families experienced. Asian American families experienced. Are we going to recapture it all? Absolutely not. Hopefully, ideally. But exposing people to ways that they can either tweak businesses that they're already doing, all the way to entering into agricultural related businesses altogether. We share that information. Again, leveraging our network, our community. So that's the big idea there. We are in partnership with, Partners Achieving Community Transformation PACT, which is a university-affiliated 501c3 based on the Near East Side, is really good about kind of seeding ideas like GGC, and they support us administratively. And they also they're a convener. And so they've brought together not only the partners that are already in the Growing and Growth Collective, but also basically they sponsored a grant through the Osteopathic Heritage Foundation. So we're collectively piloting an internal, like a community-based, a neighborhood-based food system, kind of. We're seeing if we can grow our own produce, sell it internally, bring in gardeners and growers that either work, play, or live on the Near East Side, and basically kind of make it circular, right? It's a pilot. We're planting it and seeing what happens. It is what it is. And so it's going well. We have about 4 or 5 people on board so far to participate and start from there.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of add to that. So this, I think, is one of the, and you can probably attest to this too, Jera, that this is one of the impact pillars that we most struggled with initially. So we had the agricultural education in cities, and especially leveraging our arts background, we could kind of see that connection point there and some of the other impact pillars. So we're really excited to see this one come to life, because I think this is the one where there is that chasm where it's like, you know, I want to grow, I'm interested in growing, but how can I do it to, you know, improve the life of my family, myself, and my community? So we're super excited about that initiative.
So food access and affordability, long and short, you know, we encourage people to grow for their own households, but also a lot of the excess of what we grow we just gave to food pantries. Now, in that previous relationship that we talked about, Broad Street Presbyterian Church's food pantry will actually be one of the designated buyers for the growers that are in the community. But still, we'll have plenty that will just be given there. We also have like senior citizens, so like instead of them going to like those produce giveaways, sometimes they still go, but it's too much for them. So like we just call them produce packs. So like lunch-size bags of produce that last for a week or so, and that's plenty. So just a bunch of different ways. We drop at churches, all of that. So it's fun to do that. Comprehensive health and wellness. This, again, leveraging connections. One of our original garden leaders at the Hildreth Garden, which if you'd seen it, in 2021, what it is now, it was literally a open land. Nothing was there whatsoever. And now it looks like that top picture with 30 raised beds, a beautiful shed, water. Water is very expensive to get installed, by the way. So, you know, and he worked, so Jim Warner, he worked for the James Mobile Education Kitchen, OSU Wexner Medical Center, had many connections within WexMed. And he would bring out the Mobile Education Kitchen every week. So we had a wonderful following, and then he retired, and we were all sad. But they still partner with us, and they come out once a month. So please come. It's the first Thursdays in July, August, September from 6 to 7:30. Hildreth, which you can look at the map, but it's 1201 Hildreth Avenue.
I have to just jump to a really quick anecdote. And what's really powerful about this is because it's, you know, that farm to table, which everyone loves, but it's affordable because there's no cost to it. But also you can, you know, harvest vegetables that are available. You also get a cooking demonstration and, you know, healthy ways to cook. That's also shown, and you get to try it. But my favorite story is, I think it was 2 summers ago, where Jera's like, I don't know if I really like beets. Right. And then Jim Warner's like, oh, you say you don't like beets. And he whips them up, puts some balsamic vinaigrette reduction sauce on it because he is a chef. And she's like, oh, I think I like beets. And that's powerful because there's so many, you know, things, produce items that folks will see because they've not cooked with it, or they had it prepared at one time and the person didn't know what they were doing, and they think they don't like it. And it's like, oh, no, I actually really like this. I have the same experience with Brussels sprouts, which I feel probably a lot of us in this room do. But I love them now. I did not like them as a kid. They're new Brussels sprouts.
But that's it. Kids are welcome and all of that, so that we theme the nights, the menu that they provide tasters on what's like fresh at that point in our garden. And then they talk about different ways to cook them, better alternatives to cook them, ways your kids will like them, that type of thing. So it's fun. Yes. Okay, so we did not do our full like spiel about how we came to be. You can catch that on a different day. But we've known each other since high school. And if you know, does anyone know which building this is?
Anybody?
It's the Shot Tower at Fort Hays Metropolitan Education Center, which is the anchor component is the Arts and Academic High School. I also went to Arts Impact Middle School. I was the first class.
Hey now.
And I was also a student at Duxbury, and Adrienne went to Monroe. So you were thinking, where's the arts connection? When we were thinking that multi-generational bringing in of people, just literally our first thought was like, okay, well, people like art, and these are topics that we're trying to reach people who don't know about them, so we'll just do them together. Yes. And literally it was from the very onset when we were doing our educational like outreach, it always centered in art. And we'll have one picture here, for example. I don't want to if you want to talk about Common Ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So Common Ground, this is kind of a nod to any Fort Hays students, but we had, so first of all, we went to school longer than a lot of kids. Like I think our day ended up 8 hours versus 7 hours and 15 minutes. You can still tell I'm a little bitter about that. But part of that is like, get over it, girl. This was years ago. But part of that was because of Common Ground, and that was a period where it was just kind of a dead period. You didn't have anything scheduled, but it was a great time for convening. So going back to that connection piece, that collective piece, so you would use that as a time for if you had any student groups. And another connection for Jera and myself, she was the first president of this group called Interact, and then when she graduated, I ended up becoming president. That was not on purpose, and then we were making the joke of last week, like, oh my gosh, we're adult women and we just founded a student organization because we couldn't get over it.
But what was our project? We didn't even know then. Our project
was buying
the
goats.
The goat project.
Yes.
So we raised money like by selling. Literally, I remember doing this in my kitchen. We had like cutouts of goats, and did sugar cookies shaped like goats, and we'd sell them during Common Ground. And raise money to buy goats for villages in Africa.
Yes, so that was it's like a full circle moment where it's like that agricultural piece, like that seed was literally being planted and we didn't know. And so when we came up with the arts and agriculture piece around children, we wanted to name the program Common Ground because we felt like that interdisciplinary approach of looking at agriculture and interrogating agriculture and introducing agriculture through the lens of art was kind of that common ground, that common level. And so this is a picture here. I love this. I was probably having as much fun, if not more fun than the kids, with a natural dyeing session with Grace.
Yeah, Grace Johnson, who's another connection from Ohio State. She was in the International Affairs office for a while, and then she worked in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and that was her like personal thing. Like she taught herself how to use nature's elements to create dyes, and was willing to come share it with the kids. Now she's off in Mexico somewhere doing it now.
Yes, we're jealous. I want to be there too. This is kind of one of the examples in which we, do art activities with the kids to make them understand like nature is there to provide with them to really have meaningful engagement with it, not to bleed the point because I know we have Q&A here, but, for me, sometimes, as a kid, nature is kind of like a liminal space sometimes, like it's between going to soccer practice to going to school. It's not that space that you're really in and absorbing it and sitting in it and engaging with it in a meaningful way. So we wanted to show the kids like, this is when you get these types of berries, it becomes this dye. When you get this, it becomes that. So that's kind of the ethos of why we felt like art being integrated into what we do is super important.
Yep, so that's all.
Yes.
So we have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question, just come on up, or if you raise your hand, we can deliver you a microphone.
I know Tiffany has some questions too.
Did you say my name?
You have questions prepared, yeah?
Well, I am always excited to ask questions. Let me put on my professor hat real fast. One thing that I would love to ask you all, especially the ones on stage, and if anybody in the audience would like to share, it's open and available. At what point did you think or not think that there was a connection between arts and agriculture? We can start it off with that open-ended question. It's open to anybody to answer. At what point did you think or did you not think that there was a connection or a relationship between arts and agriculture?
Oh, yeah, so I'll go ahead. So I think for me, because kind of what Jera was speaking to around our foundation being so rooted in the arts, I feel like my natural lens is to kind of look for the art in everything. I'm not an artist for real. Like, I know true artists, but I felt like there is a creativity in me. And in my day-to-day work, I'm a marketer. So, I was like, of all the business-related things that I could do, I'm going to do marketing because I need to have a creative piece. And so with agriculture, there's inherently a creative piece to it. I think the creativity comes in like the connections that you have to basically foster with not only the land, but the people around you. I think that as I am thinking of what I am planning, like me, it's always got to be about like the aesthetics piece, how things go. So like when we think about companion planting and things like that, that design, that's a masterful design. So when you think about even Three Sisters Gardens and the symbiotic piece of how they work together, that's art in that, you know what I mean? And even when you see it aesthetically, it makes sense. It looks beautiful just looking at it. And so I think that naturally made me see like agriculture has an inherent creativity in it, and within that creativity, there's an artistic component.
Absolutely. I second that. I think for me, arts and agriculture really came together from not having studio space in Brooklyn. And Ricardo and I would rehearse outside all the time, and we would see how the people in the park would respond to us, but also how we were responding to the environment. Like sometimes branches became props, in the moment. And we're like, oh yeah, so this will be in the piece, And so from there, I think we started to go to farms. Our first residency was on at Soul Fire Farm. I think about 2016, 17. Oh, yes, absolutely. We love Leah Penniman. Shout out, girl. Yes. And so when we went there, I think that's when we deepened our understanding that our movement is in direct connection to agricultural practices as African diasporic dancers. So we really started to research more on what our dances were outside. What were our people doing outside before they were in a studio saying that they're now dancers? The dance was always about living life. And so now we're in a practice that we're calling DAT, which is Dance, Agriculture, and Technology, where we really, you just experienced and are experiencing how we're really bringing all of these ideas together and connecting ourselves to the soil, connecting other folks to food and the rich history that comes with movement and agriculture.
I think your example kind of also gives it's like out of necessity, right? Mm-hmm. And so even just in our lesson planning, like, we are always doing agriculturally based, especially with kids, agriculturally based art projects. It's what you're calling it in the moment. You might just call it a science project, but it's actually art. Right. So like, if you're talking about, like making your own Play-Doh, what is it, flour, I don't know, glue, whatever. So you can talk about the elements of what it is. And then, or if we're doing potato stamping, right? The focus is typically on carving the potato to make a pretty shape and then stamp it. But you can also say, oh, these are sweet potatoes, and use different vegetables. Let's try this vegetable. Let's try that. All of these happen by happenstance, you can grow, that type of thing. So all of our projects start with just like basic things that people are already doing, but we're just working it into the narrative of the story. And we have a whole arc. We talk about food justice, and we have a art-based project around that. We talk about have them looking at like spatial relation, like so city urban planning. We have them consider where they live and how close they are to fresh produce. So you can do dioramas or whatever, like Lego projects, whatever. So there's plenty of stuff to do that you're already doing. You just have to think about how it connects to your ultimate objective.
And Jera actually made me think of one last thing. I would be remiss if I did not mention Amina Brenda Lynn Robinson. So a lot of you know, MacArthur genius, just all around amazing artist that was from Columbus, Ohio. But a lot of her work was rooted in Poindexter Village, the Blackberry Patch. And, you know, some of her characters were the vegetable man. And all these things, like we always had this, you know, as we're piloting this closed loop food system, that was once what my grandmother experienced living off of Mount Vernon Avenue. You know what I mean? And so when we would have the kids think about creating their neighborhood, we would use it within the realm of what she would do, which is mixed media art, using buttons, using things that are kind of in your junk drawer, but really like repurposing something, taking something that's around you and making it beautiful. What do we also do that with? We do that with nature. You know, we take it, we use it for our own purposes, even though nature is just inherently beautiful by itself. But we use it for our own purposes to make it something new as well. Okay.
Is it on?
Uh-huh. Oh.
Hello?
Oh, that's me. That I don't have.
Okay, so I had a thought when I walked up here, and then listening to all your commentary, I've kind of like just lost it a little bit. But I wanted to just bring up how much it resonated, your connection with your children, and bringing it back to your childhood and your connection with your mother. And so I'm a wetland ecologist and a field botanist by trade, and a lot of what my work entails is working with children and adults alike, but introducing them to these ecosystems and how incredibly powerful they are and what they do for us in the landscape. And there's just so much to teach there. But in relation to agriculture, I like to say, especially to our interns that like to ask me a bunch of questions about like, can I eat this plant? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I know what it is, but you need to look that up. So I like to say I'm like a pitiful gardener, but I know what plants are and where to put them, kind of a thing, in the natural landscape. But it really took me having my own children to really just see the world with different eyes and fresh eyes. And I started noticing when I would go to schools to work with their teachers to build a natural playscape or a pollinator garden or something like that, that I would always see artwork in those spaces. And I thought, what a beautiful, comfortable connection for kids to make something and bring it outside, for them to have something familiar in a space that they may not be familiar in. And I was an art major for like a second in college. And so I just love that side. And I like that I get to marry the two. And so I just think that's great. I think you're doing great work with your gardens and working with the community. And yeah, that's all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to say I really love the performance, and I particularly was drawn to your question about the correlation intersection between art and agriculture. And part of what I look at in our own garden is looking at reestablishing the spiritual and cultural connections between gardening in Black communities. And so I'm from Columbus. I'm fourth generation in the same congregation that my great-grandparents joined when my great-grandmother finished at Bluefield State Teachers College in 1898. And so in this church, part of what we've been doing in our garden is really helping children see the correlation and the connection spiritually and culturally. And so one of our hashtags is, he started us in a garden for a reason. Right? And so when we look at the Abrahamic tradition, whether we're looking at Islam, Judaism, or Christianity, there's that shared bondage in that initial origin story. But we also see the correlation between spiritual and cultural connections of gardening outside of the Abrahamic tradition. So in our summer day camp, we always begin with like laughter yoga. So this idea of having children see very broadly sort of spiritual and cultural connections to being in garden spaces. And so we do the plein air painting, and Jera's little boy, who's not that little anymore, has been one of our campers. But really the challenge is, again, that middle group. So we have a lot of older people who come to the garden because this is a congregation. We don't announce your birthday unless you're 90. Because otherwise we wouldn't be doing anything else. And seriously, I mean, they're very, like, I'm going to be 69 in November, and people routinely come to me and say, now, baby, I was just, thank you. But so that correlation of people, when we have our farmers market, those are the folks who come and tell the kids, now that's not how you harvest collard greens. Right, this is how you harvest and stack collard greens. So we have a lot of people who are in that elderly group, and then we have a lot of children. But this midsection that you all represent, it's very difficult to get folks past the photo op in the garden, right? I mean, once it starts to get stank hot, once it starts to get stank hot, we can't get people to come out. And now we've had some advantages because we have a farm bot, we have a hydroponic system, it's all solar powered because we partner with the College of Engineering. But we still have this issue around, and that's why I thought your performance was so spectacular. Unaddressed post-traumatic slave syndrome is a very real thing. And so a lot of people are triggered by this experience of being in the garden. Younger children they're not old enough to be triggered, and older people have already survived it. Right, and there's nothing like spending time with black people in their 90s, because they will make it all crystal clear to you. Whatever you thought you didn't know, they will tell you. You don't have to ask. But that mid piece, and so I'm really thrilled with what you're doing because I'm hoping that will bring more black people specifically into these spaces because we really need that. We really, really need that. So I don't know who I need to talk to about getting y'all who got the card, but I need to get that before y'all leave. Okay? All right, thank you.
No, but I can speak very loud.
Let's see. That's one more.
Just this idea of connecting back to the land and healing, that's really what our work is about, this healing methodology, which is why our movement is intentional, right? We're not just up here wiggling around and saying, we're talking about farming, and you're looking at us like, how do I relate? It's like, what is the real movement? What is intentional for us to tell these stories? And also, the story of black farming in the United States is very traumatic, especially talking about black farmers' relationship to the USDA, And so for us to be telling this story as dancers, what we do when you saw us first come on, we do a counterclockwise circle. Counterclockwise circles within African diaspora is about ring shouts. Ring shouts have been a space for healing for black folks, but also a technology to turn back time. Sankofa, looking back to go forward, right? And so you see us kind of tell this story along the line, or along the way, and then we shift the time again and we go forward because we are the new generation of black farmers still having to deal with, the USDA. But what is our consciousness around community now, around our own relationships to the land? And for us, that looks like healing through the movement. I mean, we come from families where they be like, child, I ain't having no garden in my backyard. We come from neighborhoods where they like, y'all farming? I ain't doing that. That's slave stuff. And we're like, wow, like that's still something ingrained in us. So being at our community garden in Brooklyn, or being at our community garden here, Growing Hearts and Hands, shout out, just for people to see our bodies in the space and being in joy and being in intergenerational community, people stop and they're like, oh, I want to do that, and that is the end, just to be able to see our bodies, to just be is enough. And so that's really kind of what we are focusing on as we are deepening our practice in agriculture. Ricardo and I both just became Ohio Master Farmers. So yeah, we're really deepening our practice so that this next generation, our generation, don't feel left out in the agricultural movement or left out of outdoor spaces because they've been privatized for too long, and our bodies need to heal with nature because also the earth needs to heal from the wounds and the trauma that's been going on from industrial farming and unhealthy lawn care habits. Yes.
I thought she was next, so I don't want to jump ahead. I love all this, and I would love for my students to know about all this. I'm a teacher of Columbus City Schools. Yay, shout out CCS. Because a lot of my students, I was teaching in high school, I teach at Independence High School, that they've never tasted real food. They've never tasted fresh food. And if I have something, if I have an extra orange or apple on my desk, they don't want that. They want the Pop-Tart. So we have all these groups that need to kind of come together. I would love to have a group come to a school or come to a gathering where there are teens and to see your performance and to talk about these things because their idea of breakfast is hot Takis. Hot Takis and some juice, maybe. So just the fact we talk about food, real food, growing it, eating it, harvesting it, that should, in my opinion, should be a project at every Columbus City school. Every Columbus City school should have its own garden to learn from, to grow with it, to share it. So all of this needs to be shared with my students and all the students of Columbus City High School. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. So yes, I think so. My profession is that I'm a fundraiser. Okay, just straight up. Senior Director of Development. I raise money. Okay. Here's the thing. So it'd be wonderful to have this in every school. It'd be wonderful to have all of these artistic expressions of art and agriculture. So if you're not an artist, but you're moved by that connection, if you're not an educator, but you're driven to make that relationship happen, you can make a difference, honestly and truly, by helping to drive resources, time, talent, treasure, whatever, to these things that make a difference. So that I never leave an audience without making an ask. My ask is to have you consider how you can make a difference within your means, but also in a significant way, so maybe a stretch, to help make these opportunities available, but also recognize what you're bringing with your investment, again, of time, talent, and treasure. So if you're coming into a space, or if you are in a position where you can support an African-American or another BIPOC group artist, and they have an idea of how this will play out, let that idea take place versus saying, oh, but I think, no. Not to say that your voice doesn't matter, but your voice isn't always needed in a certain space, right? So I'm saying, think of what you can do, maximize your impact, but also be mindful of what you bring into the strings that you attach to your investments, is what I always implore people to think about.
So this is how you can be supportive of our community garden, Growing Hearts and Hands. Right now, we're really struggling with water support, and water is essential for growing. Yeah, and it's very interesting to think about how water flows for community gardens and the care that goes into that from the city or the neighbors around. It really matters if you have good neighbors or not, because they will, let you know if you can use their water. And if you can't use their water, then who do you depend on? You got to go to the government. You can't depend on the government because they're late with loans or grants, So right now, our garden is seeking to insert a water main in our garden. And so we're raising money for that. So please donate if you can, whatever you can, because that will really support us in our growing season.
I think this segues right into the question that I have. Yes, I'm an urban farmer. However, I'm a businesswoman. And I saw them wonderful slides and the sweet smiling faces, and I'm looking at all your hard work, and I'm often telling people to pay farmers a fair wage. You said all of that to say that these amazing humans right here require currency, which is your funding, okay? Shared resources is something I'm often speaking of. It might not always come with your actual $5 in your purse, but the position you hold in your institutions, the positions you hold in your churches, the leverage that you have in your household, even if you're a stay-at-home parent, matters to this. So currency is not always funding, but sometimes it's your physical power. Or sometimes it's because you know the local mayor, when you're at that event, at the breakfast or brunch, you can say, I know a great organization that could use some funding. So my question to this wonderful collective was, how was your neighborhood development organizations and your healthy community partner spaces pouring into this idea, and I'm not going to say I'm sure I know, that you may have presented without numbers, but you presented through storytelling. The professors in the room and the professionals, you heard what I said, numbers and stories are the same weight. But if we do not have actual numbers, our funds typically are matched because they want to see the data, right? And because, like it was suggested, grassroots or seedlings take time to sprout. And it depends on the variety of the grass that you're planting. So it might not be so organized at the beginning, but what you can't see is the solidarity and the need of what's happening in these communities with the technology that is older than time itself. And although we and them are not trying to monetize off of what nature's already doing, we already know that the system has done it already anyway. Okay? So play the game with us. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You play the game with us. Don't all of a sudden show up with all the I's dotted and T's crossed, data collective pieces that keep us from thriving. This is amazing. You were all enthralled. You were all so much enjoyed. And then they were able to eloquently put language that you use every day with the word agriculture, which is something we just don't use. Hence what they were saying, that these communities are lacking language and community connections that is separating us from the bigger pieces of health and well-being. They call it social determinants of health. And I'm grateful for all of the seniors that were out there trying to say exactly what they were saying with nice charts and data. But I'm grateful because it was still needed. That kind of technology is needed to still be able to describe something so magnanimous. So I guess my question to you, because I don't want to take too much, how are you able to pull off this wonderful piece? How much support financially are these neighborhood developments and these new organizations that love to say food deserts support the great work that you're doing? Thank you. And FYI, that dance was a code. And if you weren't in here to get the code of that movement, you might not sprout the plants that you're supposed to this year.
So first of all, that was a whole entire word. So thank you for that, sis. A whole entire word. So yes, you're absolutely right. I have always said, because Jera and I, we have day jobs, and the question always comes around, would you guys do this full time? And we both have said there is, we're trying to be intentional around how we navigate that. And like you said, we're already a part of the system that money and currency is just inherent to the process. We've had to be really creative, honestly. And, to your point, there is that need to prove, once we receive funding, like what is the net impact of that? And I definitely agree with you where there is that need to have the same weightage around the numbers and the storytelling. And I get it, like you're a professor. I love empirical data just like the next person. Like, they say, they always say men lie, women lie, numbers don't. We know that. However, with grassroots organizations, especially ones such as ourselves where we have full-time jobs, she's a mom, that data collection can be a job in and of itself. So we have to kind of be creative around the storytelling. And honestly, a lot of it is around grants. That's how we've been able to do a lot of the work that we do, because as far as like fundraising in terms of like, we don't sell any of our produce. There's no really net revenue that we're getting. So we've always had to rely on grantors and, sponsors and grassroots, raising of money. And really we're at the mercy of the benevolence of those grantors and sponsors. And so year to year, we're always, and thank God she's a fundraiser, because one thing about Jera, she's going to tick and tie everything. But we're always thinking year to year, like what does this mean for us? Will we be able to realize our dreams for this organization? Because, if they decide this year, we're actually cutting grants by 50%, we may not get a grant that we got last year. So what does that mean to us now? So that's a constant, that's the one thing that keeps me up at night. I don't know if you have anything else, Jera.
I think my main thing when it comes, so how we have kind of sourced our resources, in part, if we look at the grant application and it's got 500 things going on and you want 500 other things, it's not for us. I don't know what to tell you. This ain't for us. But what's for us is for us. So we don't keep that information. We have a newsletter. We share it out. We forward it to other people. And people do the same for us. So we have that exchange. So I think it's just knowing our capacity in seeking resources and building relationships. People have come to us, like literally with like $26,000. Like, you need to write this and I'll help you shape it, but like it's yours if you can, turn it in by this date. Because we've just been authentic and we haven't been, we know our lane and we're staying in it. We stretch here and there, but like we just know our lane. So I think that has worked for us. But what you're saying though is more important in the context of philanthropy in general. Like, we need more community-centric funders. Like I've sat on boards and everything, and I've looked, coming from the fundraising lens and having done this work, and had to tell people at the end of this grant cycle that I was helping to be a reviewer, if I was a potential applicant, I would not apply, and here's what needs to change. So I think more voices who are not just willing to stick to the status quo will help force change in spaces that need to change, so that more people can have free-flowing access to resources. Was Joe coming to get us?
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Okay, one more question. That's all right. The people watching from home can do this.
Good afternoon. I would first like to say, what an amazing orator. I would follow you into the mouth of a volcano if you asked me to. And I would even ask questions. Amazing. I'll give it to you. So a suggestion and a question. Suggestion, have you thought about using rain barrels? Have you thought about different things like that? Because if you're gonna champion the money in order to put in we'll just call it a faucet. That's gonna come with a meter and that's gonna come with monthly payouts, right? And as you just said, you have to fall at the mercy of people donating. So have you thought of just different ways to grab Mother Nature's?
Asking about the rain barrels in our community garden, which we have.
Just, do I need to stand like this with this one?
Oh, look, and I'm just sitting here like.
Okay.
Is that better? So have you thought of other alternatives other than just turning on the spigot and making a monthly payment, such as?
Such as rain barrels.
Yes,
You know, definitely looking at how we're working with nature. We've had to ask the fire department to come out and give water to our garden.
Our neighbors to clean their gutters. They won't clean the gutters. So it's really about the neighbors just cooperating with the community garden. And that's usually part of the fight of having a community garden in a historically black neighborhood and your white neighbor is not responding well. Yeah.
Well, that makes me speechless. It would seem like if all I had to do was clean my gutters to help water your garden, why wouldn't I do that? Or, right? So maybe that's another avenue that you could reach out and say, hey, who has the ability to help clean the gutters? And then you could provide a free service, clean the gutters, and then maybe gather that water, right? Maybe we could do that. I'm an engineer at heart. I grew up on a 180-acre farm. So this is all very near and dear to that's my wife who spoke of our kids, and we literally have a garden out the back door. Okay. So, yeah, any way that I'm able to help in any way, let me know. And I do love data. I can data crunch all day long. And then the next question I had for you is, how are you going to scale this up? Or do you have plans to scale it up?
Okay, thank you. So yes, when the time is right. So first, thank you for that question, because that question comes from a good place, because people are positive about the work we do, and that's always great. But again, it's going to be a slow ramp up, because it isn't a full-time job for Jera and myself right now. We have 6 gardens with this new closed-loop food system that Jera spoke to earlier. We're developing 2 new garden spaces, so 6 will become 8. And I still work 40 hours on the light week, 55, 60 hours on a heavy week, on top of like drinking water, talking to my mom and resting. So, in that time, this doesn't feel like work because it's something we're passionate about. But again, kind of harkening back to what Jera said, we've been able to stay in our lane. And because of that, we've been able to see some success. One thing that I do want to see scaled up, though, is I'm hopeful and prayerful that this closed loop food system that we're piloting will be successful, because if that's the case, it will allow other folks in different parts of the city, in different parts of Ohio, to potentially replicate. And so it's not even something that we necessarily have to do, but we say, like, this is kind of the infrastructure of it. Here's the blueprint. You see if it can work in your space. And so it allows us to still work within our bandwidth, but still have some net impact in other places.
I will say the next goal in terms of scaling up, we can't scale up. Like, programs are people, people are programs. We need personnel. So at this point, interns that we can pay, maybe a part-time farm manager, part-time or full-time, whatever, office kind of support, something like that. That's our next focus from my perspective, for sure.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all who are here, and in particular, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your stories, for the incredible conversation we've been able to have here today. Thank you for sharing your talents, the work that you're putting in, to encourage reflection on connections to one another, to the land, now and over time, drawing on past, present, and future You've given us much to think about. We here want to present you with this certificate of appreciation from the Environmental Professionals Network to acknowledge your work to help us learn and shape the world for the better. Thank you. Thank you. Just a few ending notes. One fun thing about the EPN is that in the summer, we like to move outdoors and focus our learning and networking around the various bioregions and unique ecological features and natural resource research areas in our state. June 5th will be the first of our 2 summer sessions. In 1968, Dr. Bob Teeter, the first director of Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources, formed a group of friends and supporters known as the Honorary 100. 55 years later, the tradition continues through outstanding individuals who maintain a continuing supportive affiliation with our state's natural resource organizations. Our next EPN breakfast program will recognize and celebrate the contributions of John Gherkin, John O'Meara, Rick Queen, and Dorothy Teeter, and induct them into this Hall of Fame for Ohio's environment. Bill Stanley, the state director for the Nature Conservancy in Ohio, will address the importance of natural resource management and partnering to solve Ohio's water, landscape, agricultural, and forest conservation challenges. In-person attendees will then tour the internationally renowned Waterman Agricultural and Natural Resource Laboratory to see the work of Dr. Ratan Lal, who has utilized on-site plots for decades to advance crop management, education, and research. And a 28-acre forested site where Dr. Matt Davis has led research examining the effects of honeysuckle removal strategies, advanced native pawpaw planting studies, and studied forest conservation grazing. Next, on July 11th, we will travel off-campus for birding at the Grange. This event will bring together community leaders, green space advocates, and avian ecologists to showcase how a single building and its surrounding natural assets, the Grange, Audubon Center, and the Whittier Peninsula in downtown Columbus, can be restored into a thriving space for all. SCNR alum and In Her Nature Director, Nicole Jackson, I think is here with us tonight. Among other local leaders, will facilitate a discussion on the healing power of nature and pathways for creating access to birding, conservation, and the environment with communities in central Ohio. This event will feature outdoor experiences within the center's specific field-based research and learning sites and its connections throughout the Audubon network. As a birding hub in the community and a showcase for ecological restoration, conservation stewardship and advocacy that focuses on improving habitat for breeding and migratory birds in forested, riparian, prairie, and wetland zones. Similar to tonight, you will come away from this program inspired and with a clearer sense of how community residents and environmental professionals are together advancing the process of shaping a more resilient and ecologically thriving community for us all. A final event that I wanted to mention is our school seminar series, which tomorrow at 4 p.m. Will feature Sophia Buggs, who introduced herself to us today as well. Farmer and owner of Ladybugs Farm, LLC, Farm with a PH, on collaborating and partnering. Sophia was a keynote speaker of our last Signature Earth Day event as well. And tomorrow's seminar can be joined in person or via live stream. Please see Joe or Callie if you'd like details after the program on how to join. And all are welcome. If you're not already a member of the EPN, I strongly encourage you to visit epn.osu.edu to stay aware of upcoming events, post about job openings, and other activities happening across the state and region. So this concludes our events for today. Happy Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Month, and on Saturday, Happy Earth Day. And again, please join me in thanking our panel and our presenters for sharing their talents with us tonight.